Hi, I'm Tom Scioli, author of I Am Stan, a graphic biography of the legendary Stan Lee. And you can find a pre-order link in the show notes below. And I'm also the author of Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics. And at that same pre-order link, you can pre-order the softcover version of Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics. And today we're going to talk about a comic that those two men worked on together. Welcome to THORsday Comics. Every episode, we've been covering a different issue of Thor in chronological order, with every now and then a little something different mixed in. Maybe an Avengers issue that features Thor from around this time. I don't have the original of this comic, so I have this Marvel Tales reprint from the 70s, which is a very nice reprint. So you get like a nice Green Goblin story, but then you also get the mighty Thor, the Cobra and Mr. Hyde. So written by Happy Stan Lee, drawn by Healthy Jack Kirby, inked by Husky Chick Stone, lettered by Hasty Art Simic. And as usual, Jack Kirby is also the co-writer, just not credited as such. As I mentioned, sometimes I'll feature an Avengers issue because, this was, at a time of like Thor's heavy involvement in the Avengers. And so this issue of Thor starts out with a meeting of the Avengers. They're wrapping up the meeting. We have no further business to discuss, Iron Man. Might as well adjourn, Thor, and return to our normal lives. It's been a quiet few days, too quiet for Captain America. Let's go, Giant Man. Your little wasp is getting hungry. Okay, honey, there's nothing more for us to do here. A double-length modern Marvel masterpiece. Now, there was, in the letters column of the previous issue, there was an announcement that starting with this issue, the Thor stories were going to get a higher page count. The main story was going to be 18 pages, and then the normal Tales of Asgard backup. So it would eliminate that middle, science fiction story that would usually be drawn by Larry Lieber. So this is the beginning of that era. And we have the Cobra and Mr. Hyde. Now, the Cobra and Mr. Hyde, I assume, were co-creations of Jack Kirby because he drew them on the covers of each of their first appearances, and that was sort of the normal practice, that Jack Kirby would use the cover almost as like a springboard for the issue inside, whether he was the one that did the interior art or not. This will be Kirby's first time, getting to draw like an actual comic with the Cobra and Mr. Hyde. So this will be a lot of fun. This will be the first time they team up. And this teaming of the Cobra and Mr. Hyde, this is how I knew these characters. Those first appearances that we read a couple issues ago, that was the first time I read any of those. I haven't read very many non-Kirby Thor stories, from the 60s. The next few issues I have, the original comics of, and so that's always how I think of Mr. Hyde and the Cobra, as this sort of team, and a sort of a team that's part of like the earliest Thor comics, because those were sort of my earliest Thor comics. I had read issue 1 and maybe a handful of other, of the early issues, like, first appearance of Loki, a handful of them. But for the most part, I'm reading, some of these comics for the first time now. And so this is my first time reading this one. And this becomes an ongoing story. It's a two-parter here, and then a couple issues later, those threads start picking up again, and they become like major adversaries of Thor. And then when he eventually defeats them, then Loki like really comes back with a vengeance, and we start getting not just two-parters or three-parters, but we get these like multi-part, never-ending epics. So yeah, Thor, wraps up his business with the Avengers, goes flying away. This, for a while, this becomes like a sort of Kirby symbol. This, it's almost like a statue or something, this ring of the spinning hammer. And then the Cobra's sneaking around, and Thor spots him, and we get some cool action. He hits him with his hammer. We get a chance to see, Kirby doing some, Spider-Man action with the Cobra, who seems kind of like, they sort of used like Spider-Man as a jumping off point for this character. And we get a better look at some of his gadgets. They sort of, look better than they ever have before. We get a close look at these little spikes that the Cobra shoots out, and there's a whole lot of high technology, miniaturized high technology going on inside. And he sort of, throws Thor off balance with it. And just like great compositions. And we get to a bit I really like, where The Cobra sneaks in and he sees this scientist with this high-tech lab, and he's like, okay, this guy's probably got some dough around here. He says, I hope he is a successful scientist with a lot of money in his apartment for me to seize. But he kind of picked the wrong guy to mess with. This is, the scientist who becomes Mr. Hyde, and so he undergoes his transformation. And so the villains meet each other, they tussle. This is like another thing you didn't really see in any other comics. You'd see, the superheroes fight each other, but then also, the villains would fight each other too. They meet, the villains meet, they fight each other, they tussle. And then they realize, we have, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. We both have an enemy in common. We both hate Thor. So let's team up and take him out. I love this profile drawing of the Cobra. We get that kind of like Sphinx look, Egyptian motif. And then this close up on Mr. Hyde's eye, very nice stuff. Thor comes back, turns into Don Blake. Nurse Jane tells him that she's got a date. And he's like, oh, that's nice. And he plays it cool. And she takes that to mean he doesn't care about her. And so this date, she was kind of hoping he would say something like, oh, please don't go on a date with that guy, go on a date with me. But he didn't. I must act as though I don't care for her sake. Of course, Jane, I hope you have a good time. I was right. Sob. He really doesn't care. If I meant anything to him, he'd be angry. Jealous, but he's not. My love means nothing to him. So we get like one of those panels like you would see like a typical, romance comic kind of panel with a lot of, intense thought balloons going on. And so Mr. Hyde has this new invention he's created. It's kind of ingenious. It's a time rewinder. He can project it at the person whose timeline he wants to rewind, and then he projects it at the wall, and we get a reverse order of what happened to that person. And so it's nice we get these sort of photo stats of the figures from the previous panels. I'm pretty certain Kirby didn't redraw those. They're pasted down. I'd love to see the original art for this. They're going to do the same thing with Thor. Mr. Hyde is going to try to attract Thor by committing a jewelry store robbery, and then the Cobra is going to film, take his, aim that reversal ray at him, and then he's going to play it back and rewind. And they see it rewind, and he goes into the window of Dr. Don Blake, but it stops there. And they're like, why does it stop? It shouldn't stop. We should be able to view it further. And of course, we understand the reason why it stops is because the guy they filmed, Thor, ceases to exist at that point, because that was, just before Dr. Don Blake transformed into Thor. So Thor didn't exist until that moment, which is a pretty ingenious way of getting around the thing of them finding his identity. So they know Thor went there, and so they show up at Don Blake's office. They shake him down. Meanwhile, Jane Foster is on her date. Mr. Hyde kidnaps her, and they take her back to the office to sort of shake Don Blake down into, telling them, where Thor is, how to find Thor. And when they're not looking, and Mr. Hyde grabs Don Blake's walking stick and he taps it. At least in this issue, I don't know that this applies anywhere else, but at least in this issue, if anybody taps it, he can transform. Now, we've had something like that previously where somebody else taps the cane, but then Don Blake kind of like touches it at the last second and transforms into Thor. But nothing like that seems to happen here. So a little quirk in the rules. And so as soon as the walking stick turns into the hammer, Hyde cannot lift it. He's sort of glued to the floor from it. Then Thor picks it up. Nice shot there. Challenges them to a fight. The Cobra scoots out the window, slips and slides around the walls. I like his kind of locomotion. Kirby gives everybody a different kind of locomotion. Thor, does the hammer swing. And then Hyde has like another device that he uses to attract the Uru metal in Thor's hammer. And he lures him to this machine show, which is kind of fun. And there's all these, Kirby draws these industrial machines that, it's like he has to make something that's a little bit advanced, but not too advanced. It's not, this isn't like a Reed Richards lab or anything. This is a machine trade show. I could see like a remake of this story, sort of taking them on a chase scene into like a comic convention, maybe. Mr. Hyde throws a bunch of machinery at Thor, and boom, we get a wordless panel. Very interesting drawing here. Very, very interesting choice of a wordless panel. You know, something a little odd, a little off about that panel, the drawing of it, but again, it's kind of fun to have something a little odd and off, you know, every now and then. I wonder what it would be like if this and this were both silent panels. The Cobra gets control of one of the machines, snags Thor's hammer, and then pulls it into another machine. Now he's facing down these two guys. You know, he basically has 60 seconds to get his hammer back, or he's turning into Don Blake. So we get a nice little cliffhanger there. I read this, you know, I've read the story that comes after this, so it's kind of nice seeing, because it starts off at that machine show, so it's kind of nice seeing how they got there. This issue was a lot of fun, lots of action. It was cool seeing those two bad guys sort of team up. I like the idea of that time reversal ray that they, you know, that's pretty cool. Lots of fun little bits in this, but you know, they definitely have better appearances in future issues. They come to pose like a very you know, real and powerful threat to Don Blake, especially regarding Jane Foster. You know, she's often put in, you know, just sort of seemingly dire peril with these two. So, you know, this was pretty good, but there's better things to come. So let's check out the Tales of Asgard. So this one was teased at the end of last issue, when Heimdall failed. So this is a story of the time Heimdall failed. Written by Stan Lee, illustrated by Jack Kirby, inked by George Bell, lettered by Art Simic. We're starting to get that you know, visual vocabulary of Kirby's Asgard, this very unique fusion of, you know, ancient god stuff with technology, and this is a real nice example with this little view screen made out of these sort of, you know, organic shapes, almost like a plant machine. This is Nedra, and this is Brimmer, and Nedra has this sort of amazing fur coat outfit. The previous issue where we had the Enchantress, it looked like Kirby was sort of referencing, you know, like maybe Playboy magazine, which was, you know, a relatively new phenomenon around this time. And this sort of extreme fur coat looks like something that would have been in like a 1960s issue of Playboy. So I wonder if you know, Kirby's continuing to pilfer that. This guy, this little cape he has, it looks almost like he's got sort of like turtle powers or something. This is, you know, kind of like a deep cut from mythology. They're getting one of the Vanna, you know, try to sneak into Asgard. I think that's what Vanaheim is named after. It's like the home of the Vanna. So we're getting some Norse mythology deep cuts, and so in this, he's kind of like a sprite or a pixie kind of character, one of the fair folk, and he's being, you know, sent into Asgard. He zips by Heimdall. Heimdall can't see him, but he senses there's something there, so he starts swinging at the air. And then, and he's never had that sensation before. Heimdall just looking super cool, the three-dimensionality of this helmet, the deep shadows. The Vanna is going to report back on the sort of, you know, what kind of high technology, you know, warfare units he sees in Asgard. And we're starting to get these sort of like, okay, this doesn't look like any catapult I've ever seen. We're starting to see like the sci-fi creep into Thor's mythology little by little. You know, the Asgardians, you know, practicing for battle. Some, you know, really cool incidental characters. You know, you could you know, create a whole universe out of Kirby's side characters that show up for one panel and are never seen again. And then we get to the planning room. Odin's doing some, you know, in-depth wartime planning with maps and everything. And then Odin senses a presence in the room, and he reaches out his hand and grabs this little guy. And then Heimdall bursts in. "You have captured a Vanna, my lord. Then truly have I failed my trust, for he entered Asgard without my knowledge. That's right, great Odin. Punish Heimdall, not me. I did you a favor. I proved he is not worthy to guard the Rainbow Bridge. You shall be punished, false-tongued one. Odin can see through your web of lies, but my dealings with you can wait. First, I must give Heimdall his due. Do with me as you wish, noble lord, but no punishment you mete out to me can be as painful as the regret I feel in my heart for my failure. Rise, gallant Heimdall, you have not failed. So loyal is your heart that you sensed the evil Vanna, even though you could not see him. And so honorable is your soul that you reported your fears to me, although you knew others might scorn you for fearing the unseen. Return to your post, Heimdall, and know that you hold a place in the heart of Odin, second only to Thor himself. You know, Heimdall resumes his post as Odin's armies march on across the Rainbow Bridge, to war. So we get like a nice little like expansion of, the Thor world of Norse mythology and sort of, Jack and Stan's particular spin on it, and we get to know the character of Heimdall pretty well. A little teaser for next issue, the arrival of Vince Coletta, and this time Balder the Brave gets the spotlight. So this one's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be a lot of fun to talk about too. So thank you for joining me. I'm Tom Scioli, author of I Am Stan, a graphic biography of the legendary Stan Lee. There's a pre-order link in the show notes below for that book. And I'm also the author of Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics. And at that same pre-order link, you can pre-order the softcover edition of Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics. I'll see you next Thursday.